And the UFC is back this Saturday after a week off after UFC 300. We are back for UFC Apex. Matheus Nicolau and Alex Perez in the main event from the UFC Apex. Now, this is a main event. Alex Perez, guys, has not won a fight since his last main event at UFC 256, I believe, against Diniz and Figueiredo. 256 was Figueiredo, and Moreno won. He has not won since UFC 255. He has not won since UFC 250 when he won on the undercard of Felicia Spencer and Amanda Nunes when he leg kicked the hell out of Jussier Formiga. That's how long ago Alex Perez has won a fight in the UFC octagon. For Matheus Nicolau, this is a guy who is coming off of a loss to the number one contender right now in Brandon Royval. Obviously, Royval not fighting for the flyweight championship next, but Royval went out there and defeated Nicolau in the first round by knockout. Before that, though, Nicolau was on a 4-fight winning streak. Should he have been in that winning streak? I don't know. Again, the Manel Kopp fight was close. But anyways, originally supposed to be Nicolau versus Kopp 2. Kopp pulls out, and here we go. It's Nicolau versus Perez. Now, again, I won't complain about the quality of the card this week. I won't, because we're coming off UFC 300. However, I will complain that it's in the Apex. I don't care that Matheus Nicolau and Alex Perez are in the main event, because I'm going to go back to 2015, where Luis Smolka main evented a UFC fight night against Paddy Holohan, again, in Dublin, Ireland, back in 2015. I understand Dustin Poirier was supposed to be in the main event. I understand at one point that was supposed to be Stipe Miocic and Ben Rothwell, but at the end of the day, still 10,000 people filled an arena in Ireland to go watch the UFC that night. I don't care. They can put this card in Portland, Oregon. You can put it in Oklahoma City, places that haven't had the UFC for a while. It will sell. Put it back in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Put it in the Bay Area, who has not had a card since I believe 2011. Like, seriously, the not just the world, America is just in need of UFC fights in terms of fights with live crowds. You could put Nicolau and Perez, I'm serious, in some small venue that has a 5,000 person capacity and it'd still sell out. But we're lazy and we're going to stay in the UFC Apex. That's my little rant about the Apex like I do every single week. And folks, if you haven't yet, though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. Let's get it going. Our first fight of 13 on this card. We'll start off here with Maheshate Heiser. Add in the last name, just going to call him Maheshate. Taking on Gabriel Mowgli Benitez in this fight. For the Chinese fighter, who is the favorite actually in this one, Maheshate, coming off of back-to-back losses to the likes of Rafa Garcia and Slava Claus. He lost that fight to Borshev by second round TKO, a fight that he just got dominated in, and now he turns around and he is the favorite against one Gabriel Mowgli Benitez. I understand it though, because what has Benitez done, right? This is the guy who's 7-7 in the UFC, who has lost in his last, it's last 6 fights, he's 2-4. I understand he lost to Sodi Youssef, but then you got a loss to Omar Morales, a win over Justin James, who, again, the Guitar Hero is not the greatest UFC fighter, don't care. He loses to Billy Quarantillo, loses to David Onama, beats Charlie Ontiveros, and loses to Jim Miller. It's a weird mixed bag of results because the guys he loses to are all guys that are supposed to beat Gabriel Benitez. The guys he beat, though, again, James and Quarantillo, are guys who are not UFC caliber. So it's a really weird mixed bag of results for Gabriel Benitez in his last couple fights in the UFC. You get his opponent here in Maheshate, who's coming off those back-to-back losses to Garcia and Slava Claus, and then you got the win over Steve Garcia back at UFC 275, where he wins it by knockout in the first round. Again, he's got power, he does. He does hit very hard. But again, when you look at the Borshev fight, Borshev was able to really capitalize on a lot of things. Again, Maheshate leaves himself wide open to get hit multiple times in that fight. He gets dropped twice in the second round, gets dropped once in the first round as well. My thing is, can Gabriel Benitez beat him? I don't know, right? Because Benitez just has really not looked good as of late. I mean, you look at his wins, okay, the Ontiveros fight, he closes distance and he knocks him out in the first round. Can he knock out Maheshate? I don't know. I mean, again, when you look at the Ontiveros fight, he doesn't knock him on the feet, but he closes distance, gets the takedown, and then gets him down and works the TKO. That's what I mean by closing distance, right? Because he's able to get the takedown against Ontiveros, and he's gonna have to wrestle to beat Maheshate. Again, so if he can work the takedown and then get him down, and of course look for the TKO once the fight's on the ground, maybe that's how he wins this fight, because again, for Maheshate, this is a guy who isn't primarily a grappler. Rafa Garcia took him down 6 times. I think, again, if there's a pathway to victory for Benitez, it is going to be through the grappling game. I don't know. Again, he's not a horrible striker. He did drop Billy Quarantillo. He knocked out Justin James. Again, though, he's just been on the wrong side of a lot of these results. Knocked out by David Onama in the first round, who we're going to see later on in this card. I'm going to take the favorite, Maheshate. I'm not completely sold on this pick, though. I like it really. He could get taken down. He could get dominated down there. I'm not going to lie. Again, Garcia was able to take him down 6 times. He went 6 for 11 on the attempts, 6 minutes of control. We'll see how he's able to fight off the takedowns of Benitez, because I think if this fight does stay standing, I think Maheshate does win. So I'm going to take him to win the fight by first round knockout. Another thing to note, again, the Chinese fighter is only 24 years old. He's only getting better, right? He came to the UFC at a very young age. He won his first fight, then dropped the next 2. If he's going to stay in the promotion, he's got to win this fight. This feels like a loser goes home type of fight. The loser of this fight will end up fighting in the regionals. For Maheshate, obviously, you could probably see him make his way back or build his way back, probably through the road to the UFC, like Rongju did do. However, though, I think he does remain in the UFC with a win here. I think he does beat Gabriel Benitez by first round knockout. So that's our first pick, Maheshate by first round KO. On to our next one here, a huge favorite here in the women's flyweight division. We've got Ivana Petrovic taking on Liang Liang. I believe it's Liang Na. That's what we're going with here. The Chinese fighter is 19-7 coming into this fight, and I'll just be honest with you, she's not very good. She's 0-3, getting her 4th fight in the UFC. Now, you might know Na Liang or Liang Na for her fight against Ariane Cartolosi. It's the first fight back with the crowd, UFC 261 in Jacksonville, Florida. It's a fun fight, but Liang Na does gas, and Cartolosi takes over and finishes her in the 2nd round. The Silvana Gomez-Juarez fight over in Singapore. Well, Gomez-Juarez knocks Liang Na out in the 1st round, and their next fight against JJ Aldridge. Aldridge dominates the fight. Liang Na looks to take her down, but Aldridge eventually gets the finish in the 2nd round. That one is in Singapore as well. Now she's coming over to the States for the first time since that Jacksonville card in 2021 to take on Petrovic. Again, Na Liang Na, 4 fights in the UFC in 4 different years. Again, Petrovic, if you watched her first fight in the UFC, wasn't great. The Luana Carolina fight, I thought she was going to beat Luana Carolina. She didn't, right? She looked slow in that fight. Carolina beats her to the punch, and Carolina just kind of out-grapples her. Again, when you saw Petrovic before the UFC, wins in Aries, right? She was the reigning Aries flyweight champion. I liked her win in that fight in the main event, or wasn't a main event, Staropoulos was in the main event, but it was a co-main event for the flyweight championship. She wins it by submission in the 4th round. Again, she goes into the championship rounds and she wins. So I was thinking, okay, maybe she's going to come into the UFC and she's going to put on a pretty good performance against Carolina, who's looked, very mid. But no, Carolina beats her. So it just kind of shows you, where we're at with women's MMA. It's such a crapshoot at times. However, this one doesn't feel like a crapshoot, because no way does Liang Na win this fight. Ivana Petrovic is going to win, and she's going to get a finish. Because again, Liang Na gets finished in there. She doesn't. She's got horrible cardio, and fighters are able to beat her on the ground. I'm taking Ivana Petrovic to win this fight by late 2nd round TKO. Again, I'm picking a finish in a women's fight. I know, I understand. But still, Liang Na is just not good. Petrovic, despite the loss to Carolina, can go 15 minutes and can fight a certain pace for an entirety of a fight. And I just don't feel good ever picking Liang Na in a fight after her first 3 fights in the UFC. What has changed, I don't know. I know that Ivana Petrovic has experience in there, given the only 7 fights, but still she has championship experience. She's been late in fights, and she's been able to finish fights as well on the ground. You saw her rear naked choke victory in that late 4th round victory. In Aries, when she won the championship initially, she wins by submission in the 3rd round. I think she gets a TKO finish here, though. Give me Ivana Petrovic to take down Liang Na, and then look really good in terms of her strikes on the ground. I think eventually, again, Liang Na might just quit out there just because her cardio is horrible. Give me Ivana Petrovic to win the fight by 2nd round TKO. So we're starting the card off with 2 straight finishes. Well, we get one here. We have got James Llontop taking on Gabe Green. You got the Peruvian fighter here who comes into this fight with a 14-2 record, winning on the Contender Series over Malik Lewis. Don't know if I'm entirely sold on him, though. He's getting Gabe Green, who fought maybe the worst style of fight you could possibly fight in his last fight in Charlotte, North Carolina, when he fights Brian Battle. I don't know if it was the crowd. I don't know what it was, but Gabe Green goes in there and just sprints towards Brian Battle, throws a couple shots, and boom, gets right hooked into oblivion, and he loses the fight. It was the worst game plan he could have fought. He was coming off a fight where he went 15 minutes with Ian Machado Gary, and it only took 14 seconds for Brian Battle to knock him out. Gabe Green swung wild, he left himself exposed, and he got put down to the canvas. The Ian Machado Gary fight wasn't horrible for Gabe Green, right? He loses every single round, but still the 2nd round's close, and he makes a pretty good account of himself in that fight. Before that, back-to-back wins over Phil Rowe and Johan Lainus, and then before that, losing his UFC debut to Daniel Rodriguez all the way back in 2020. So Green has been around. He's coming back, though, to take on the UFC debutant fighter here in Llontop, who, again, the win over Malik Lewis, it's a good unanimous decision victory, right? He drops Lewis a couple times in that fight. I just, I don't know how good of a prospect Lewis truly is, right? Because this is a guy who's 0-2 so far in the Contender Series. You look at what Lewis did before getting on the Contender. He won a good fight over a guy named Marcos Vinicius, who at the time was 15-3, I do believe. Yeah. But you go back and you really look at some of these guys, right? He beats Marcos Vinicius, Malik Lewis. I know I'm going down the ladder here because, Llontop beat Lewis and Lewis beat Vinicius, but I'm just giving you some background to some of these guys, right? Okay. Malik Lewis is the guy that Llontop beat on the Contender. Okay, Lewis got the shot on the Contender initially after beating a guy named Marcos Vinicius, who was 15-3 at the time. Looks like a tremendous victory, right? Well, okay, you look at who Vinicius beat up until that Lewis fight. He's coming off a win over a guy who's 0-8, 3-7, 10-8, 10-9. The only losses he had were to a guy who's 14-7 and 15-4. He's beating guys who are 5-10, right? So that's all right. So Lewis then goes on and loses to Trevor Peek on the Contender Series. Okay, it's going to happen, right? Comes back, he wins a fight against Paulo Silva, who at the time is 8-6. Right? And then he again goes and fights Llontop, and Llontop beats him by decision. Lewis hasn't fought since. Remember that guy Marcos Vinicius? Well, he's lost 4 straight fights after fighting that fight against Malik Lewis. So that kind of goes and shows you the level of competition Llontop's fought. I understand that, again, it's not his fault. But some of the guys he fought even before the Contender, right? He's beating guys who are 20-9, 19-16, 20-11. Don't get me wrong, they have experience, but I really don't know how good the regional Peruvian MMA scene is, and he has not fought in America. He has not fought some of these elite level guys, and no disrespect to, Peruvian regional and mixed martial arts, but it's not one of the, Southern American, regionals that like Lux. It's one like, again, he's fighting an FFC, and he's fighting guys who, again, are just not the best fighters. The guy that Llontop beat going into the Contender Series was a guy named Nilson Oliveira, who, going into the Llontop fight had lost 2 out of 3, and since the Llontop fight, he's lost 3 fights in a row. It's just tough to gauge really how good he is. I know Gabe Green's decent, really, right? I understand Llontop. Again, he's a good striker. I think he's gonna have some trouble here with the pace that Gabe Green can set. I think Gabe Green, again, when he goes into that bag, he can wrestle some, and the striking game as a whole is not horrible as well. Again, if he doesn't fight a stupid fight like he fought against Brian Battle, Gabe Green can eat some shots and he can stay in the fight. That's why I do actually like Gabe Green in this one. I think Llontop's incredibly unproven, truly. He's 24 years old, and he's won a bunch of fights against guys that aren't very great, right? And again, we'll see how good Malik Lewis turns out to be, but I don't think he's ever going to be a UFC name after going 0-2 in the Contender. Again, I understand Gabe Green. I think, I know he's lost back-to-back. The odds are going to fluctuate on this. I made this graphic a couple days ago, and I forgot to mention, by the way, also, I'm recording this video on Thursday night, so, it is what it is. I'm going to go on vacation this weekend, so again, I need to get this video out early, or at least I need to make it early. So if there are any changes to this card, I'll have some updates in the description down below. I'll do some write-ups on that if there are changes on this card. If the main event changes, I'll make a separate video updating you on the main event. But because Alex Perez does pull out a lot, I just will say that. So right now the odds -125 for Gabe Green, +105 for Llontop, but it has changed since I made the graphic. I think yesterday I made it 2 days ago. No, I didn't make it yesterday. Right now I see -135 for Llontop. So you're getting odd shifts on this all the time. I like Gabe Green personally. I think he wins the fight by decision. I think he's going to push a pace on Llontop. Again, I don't think Llontop has fought guys who are on the level of Green, and I think it's going to be a real surprise when he gets a UFC guy like Gabe Green. I'm going to take Gabe Green. I'm going to take the experience. All around, I like the game better. Give me Green by decision. To our next one here. Personally, I don't know how Mardik Mann's in the UFC. I'll go out. I'll say this outright. I don't think she's a UFC fighter. I don't think she is. Right now, she's fighting Ketlen Souza, who's not great. Ketlen Souza is not great in any stretch of the imagination. There's a reason this fight's in the Apex. But Mardik Mann, I'm just like, how did she even get in the UFC is my question. It's truly. Because I've seen her get head kicked by Bruna Brazil on the Contender. That's fine. She made her way to the Contender Series. She loses. Her best wins over Polyane Messias. It's back in 2021 in LFA. Then she parlays that into a victory by split decision over a fighter who was 1-1 at the time. Gets the Bruna Brazil fight, loses on the Contender. Beats a fighter who's 7-6 in Amber Brown, who, yeah, Brown's fought some names, right? She fought Ashley Yoder. She fought Ashley Cummins. She's fought names, right? Like, Cummins, because Cummins has fought a bunch of fighters as well. She fought Grosso. She fought Joanne Wood. It's right. It's all these Invicta fighters who never make it to the UFC, but have fought a lot of, these fighters coming up. But anyways, Mann beats Amber Brown and then gets a shot in the UFC and fights Josephine Knudsen, and Knudsen absolutely dominates the fight. It's so one-sided. There's a 30-24 card in this. It's crazy. Knudsen just takes her down and absolutely dominates the fight. Mann has no answers. And now she's getting a fighter here in Ketlen Souza. Okay, Ketlen Souza is not on the grappling level of one Josephine Knudsen. And Ketlen Souza is coming off a fight where she lost in 1 minute and 45 seconds to Silva, who we're going to talk about later on in this card. I just think Ketlen Souza is better, though. Ketlen Souza will be able to implement a game on the ground, and she should be able to get on Marnik Mann and not let her back up. Marnik Mann is small for the weight class. She should probably be fighting at atomweight, right? I think the UFC can make room for an atomweight division if we're going to get rid of the 145-pound division. Make atomweight and see what happens. I've supported that a lot. I think they should do it, but they won't. It's fine. I understand not having too many weight classes. I get it, but why make a 145-pound division then, right? And you still have it technically, and not like Kayla Harrison fighting it. I don't know. Harrison looked good at 135. I'm not going to complain. Anyways, she's going to be the champion probably in a year, right? I think first Raquel's going to have to fight Juliana Pena. So I think we're going to get a Pena-Harrison title fight, which, okay, it'll build more than Pennington, right? More people will care about Pena than Pennington. Anyways, Marnik Mann fighting out of Montana. I just don't think she's very good. She's small for the weight class. She's 5 feet tall. Ketlen Souza's 5'3". They're not both big straw weights. But again, I think Souza's able to get her down. I think Souza's able to give her a lot of trouble. Souza struggles. Some of the grappling, sure, she's been submitted twice. But again, Marnik Mann, I just don't think's good at all. I think Souza beats her on the feet too. All around, I think this is a complete shutout. Do I think we get a finish in this one? God, I don't want to pick it. I'm going to say decision for Ketlen Souza. Yeah, if Newton's not able to finish Marnik Mann, I don't think Souza's able to do it either. I think Souza, though, does probably get a 10-8 in there somewhere. I think she wins this fight 30-26-ish. I think, the line right now around minus 340, minus 325-ish for Souza. I think that's going to jump to maybe even like minus 550 by the end of the week. I truly think this is very one-sided. Give me Ketlen Souza by decision. To our next one here. Back in the heavyweight division, we've got Don'Tale Mayes and Caio Machado. All right, Don'Tale Mayes, the guy's 10-6. He's been back and forth with wins, right? He looked really good in the Andre Arlovski fight. I'm surprised Arlovski's still fighting. He's booked to fight in the Apex of all places in a couple months against Martin Budaj. We'll see what happens there. But Don'Tale Mayes picks up the biggest win of his career, right? He beats Andre Arlovski. Then he drops a fight to Rodrigo Nascimento by unanimous decision. And you're telling me if Don'Tale Mayes could have beat Nascimento, he'd be in a main event right now with Derek Lewis? My goodness, the UFC's crazy. Anyways, Mayes now, instead of fighting in a main event, he's going to get Caio Machado on an undercard of an Apex card, which is fine. Machado's coming off a UD loss to one at Mick Parkin. Do I think Mick Parkin's the greatest? No, he's still technically undefeated in the UFC, right? He's able to, grapple against Machado. Machado wins on exchanges on the feet a lot, actually, in this fight. He does better than I thought he was going to do. However, again, Parkin wins this fight on the ground, right? Machado wins the third because Parkin's not able to take him down, but in the first and the second, Machado looks good with the striking. I don't think Machado's got the most power, though, right? He wasn't able to, really wobble Parkin all that much, even deep in that fight in the third. You look at his contender win, right? 121 significant strikes, doesn't get the finish against his opponent back there in 2023. So he fought twice in the span of a couple months last year. I think Don'Tale Mayes is the all-around better heavyweight, though. So I'm actually going to take Don'Tale Mayes, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to take Mayes to win. Probably by decision. It's probably not going to be great. I think Mayes is able to do more damage with his hands. And I know I might be basing this a little bit off his win over Andre Arlovski, and Arlovski's chin, it is what it is, 60-something fights in. I understand that. But I do think Don'Tale Mayes does hit harder, and I think Don'Tale Mayes actually can do some damage with the wrestling too. I've seen Don'Tale Mayes go out there, and I've seen him, hump Josh Parisian in the face. I kid you not, that actually happened, right? They were in north-south position, and Don'Tale Mayes decides they're like this, and Don'Tale Mayes decides to go like that, and to use his cup. I'm serious, and it was more of his hip to try to, hit the face of Josh Parisian. That actually happened. Go watch it. I'm not crazy. And then he wins the fight rates, back-to-back wins for Mayes. Then he loses to Hamdia Del Wahab. Fight gets overturned or no contest. So he fights Augusto Sakai. Sakai gets the win. He beats Arlovski. He loses to Nascimento. I'm not sold on either of these guys. Don't get me wrong. I don't think either of these guys are very good. I don't think either of these guys are going to crack the top 15. Even though actually, if Mayes beat Nascimento, he'd be in the top 15 right now. So that's just showing you how bad the UFC's heavyweight division truly is at this point. I think Mays wins. I think he gets it done by decision. I think Mays is able actually to wrestle in this fight. He has not done that since the Parisian fight, but Mays did see a gap in the game of Parisian in that fight. He decided to exploit the wrestling. I think there's a chance to exploit the wrestling game of Kyle Machado here. I know Dontel Mays is not on the level of McParkin, or maybe he is. I don't know. But I think, honestly, I think he's able to get some takedowns in this fight. I know Parkin went 3 for 10, but I think Mays is able to get, some of that game off, and we say it all the time, your wrestling makes your striking better. So if Mays can get a takedown early, he's really able to affect the fight going forward, and I think Mays is able to go out here and win this fight. I'm going to take Dontel Mays. We're taking the experience in the UFC in this fight, right? This is Mays' 9th walk in the octagon. This is going to be Machado's 2nd. So give me the UFC veteran and Dontel Mays. I think he takes care of business. The second time in this card, we've taken the veteran over the guy, who's somewhat younger coming off the contender. I like Mays to get it done. We're going to take him by unanimous decision. Shouldn't be that great, but whatever. We're taking him by decision. To our next one, Austin Hubbard taking on Michael Figlak in this fight, or Michelle Figlak. I'm not impressed with either of these guys, and this might be a theme here on this UFC Apex card. And again, there's a reason these guys are on the UFC Apex, or fighting in the UFC Apex. But Figlak loses to Fereziam, and maybe I'm being too harsh on Fereziam. Maybe I am, but I just don't think he's very good either, right? Figlak's 8-1. I was expecting so much more going into the Ziem fight. He's a minus 200 favorite. He's supposed to go out there. He's supposed to destroy Fereziam. And he loses the fight by decision, and Fereziam simply kind of just outclasses him. I scored every single round for Fereziam in that fight, and I picked Figlak to win. Ziem outclasses him on the feet, he outclasses him on the ground, and Figlak has no answers to anything that Fereziam's basically throwing at him, right? It's not complete domination to the point where, okay, you think there needs to be a stoppage, but you can tell who's winning the fight, and you can tell who's winning every single round, right? He's getting Austin Hubbard, who is in his 2nd stint in the UFC. He's coming off a loss to an old Kurt Hollowball in his last fight. Hollowball since then's lost to Trey Ogden, and the guy's 1-5 now in the UFC, and the one win is Austin Hubbard. But they decided to bring back Hubbard, right? So his first UFC run's odd. He goes up there, loses to Davey Ramos, wins the fight, loses to Mark Madsen, beats Max Roscoff in that infamous fight, loses to Joe Selecki, beats Dakota, nicknamed Harry Bush, loses to Vince Pichel, gets cut, wins 2 fights, comes back in the Ultimate Fighter, beats Aaron McKenzie, beats Roosevelt Roberts by split decision, and loses to Kurt Hollowball by triangle choke in the 2nd round. And here we are back in the UFC Apex. I think Figlak should win. I think Figlak has the way better striking game. Truly, I think he does. Hubbard doesn't really blow you away with anything. Hubbard will try to wrestle you. That's how he got stuck in the position that he did against Hollowball, right? He takes down Hollowball, and obviously the triangle choke, he's on, Hubbard's on top. Hollowball throws up the triangle, and he taps. But Hubbard will try to wrestle you, right? He's been the aggressor in terms of wrestling in every fight that we've seen him in the UFC, other than the Mark Madsen fight, which obviously makes sense, right? He tried to put on the pace against Vince Pichel in terms of the wrestling, because when there are wrestling exchanges in Austin Hubbard fights, usually it is him engaging. I think Figlak is able to, keep the fight standing, because that's where I think Ziem really messed him up a little bit, was, again, the threat and the takedown. I think if Figlak can keep the fight standing, I think he can win. I'm not confident in this pick at all. I will be straight up honest with you. This fight could simply go either way, because Hubbard could just go on there and just completely ground the guy for 15 minutes, and Figlak could look exactly what he looked like in that Fereziam fight in his UFC debut. Completely could happen. But I'm going to hope that we get the same guy that we got in the Cage Warriors promotion. I think Figlak is able to go out there and pick up that first win in the UFC against a guy who is a very 50-50 UFC name, against a guy who's 3-5 in the UFC. Everything should point to a Michelle Figlak victory. I'm taking him to win the fight by decision. I think he just beats Hubbard on the feet. He should be able to be the quicker fighter, and as long as, again, he doesn't get taken down, he should win. Give me the Polish fighter to win by unanimous decision. To our next one. Ooh, this is a scrap. Yahya versus Victor Henry. So Victor Henry obviously got absolutely, poor guy, got kicked in the balls in his last fight against one Bashrat, right? That fight, interesting fight until it, ended, right? Victor Henry against Javid Bashrat. That first round's close. I think it's score up for Javid Bashrat, but that second round, right, Bashrat just kicks him right under the belt, and Victor Henry ended up in the hospital for how bad that cup shot truly was. He's not going to have to worry about that entirely against Yahya, or he's just not going to, have to worry about the striking game as a whole. Because if you don't know who Yahya is, this is just a grappler. Yahya is a a very good Brazilian jiu-jitsu player who is going to try to take you down. He's going to try to submit you. I was mad that Cody Garbrandt and Hani Yahya never happened. It was booked twice in 2022, and the fight fell through both times. Now, after watching Deiveson Figueiredo and Cody Garbrandt, would Cody Garbrandt get taken down and submitted by Hani Yahya? I don't think so. I think that's just Figueiredo being a top 10 bantamweight. But I do think it would be interesting still, honestly, if we saw Hani Yahya versus Garbrandt. I wouldn't fear for Garbrandt getting knocked out. I don't think Hani Yahya gets cut from the UFC with a loss here because he's won actually 2 out of 3. So, from Cody Garbrandt, let Garbrandt be a minus 1,000 favorite. Now, I don't think Hani Yahya has much of a chance in this fight. Again, there's a reason this guy's coming at you on the odds at plus 440. Henry's at minus 600, and Henry is a guy who's, 2-1 in the UFC. It's all dependent on if he can stuff the takedown from Hani Yahya, and I think he will. Tony Gravely's not a bad wrestler at all, right? And that's Victor Henry's one of his better wins in the UFC, right? His first win in the UFC is good against Hani Barcelos, don't get me wrong, but his Gravely win's good too, right? Don't see how that fight should have been a split decision. I thought Henry won that fight pretty convincingly. He stuffs 14 takedowns from Gravely in that fight. Gravely goes 3 for 17, only has the fight on the ground for 3 minutes, right? It's a very good defensive wrestling performance for Victor Henry. It's on the undercard of Merab Dvalishvili and Piotr Yan, that fight in Las Vegas. Not in the Apex though, so it was, actual environment, right? Henry fights well, and what Victor Henry does, he's always in the process of striking. At all points is Victor Henry throwing something, right? And that's how you see his significant strike count. It's always at the highest, right? I mean, look at the Barcelos fight, 181 significant strikes, 154 against Tony Gravely. It turned out in the Rafael Assunção fight, Assunção was just a little bit more than he could chew. Okay, it's fine. He's regrouped. He's beat Gravely. I thought, Basha was probably going to beat him. But now, again, he gets a very, favorable matchup here in Hani Yahya. And as long as he can stuff a takedown, he should be able to win. I don't see any threat for Victor Henry in this fight in terms of striking with Hani Yahya, right? That's just not what he does. It's simple. Hani Yahya does not win striking fights. He has 0 wins by TKO in his career. As long as Henry keeps the fight standing, he should win. And I actually think Victor Henry's going to get an early knockout in this one. I'm going first round KO for Henry, something he has not been able to do since he fought an RCC back in 2019. I understand. But I think Hani Yahya's chin might be just kind of gone. And I get Montel Jackson hits hard. That's Yahya's last fight. And Jackson's 7-2, and he's got a very fun fight against Saeed Nurmagomedov coming up, and I'm pumped for that fight. But I think Henry's able to land on the chin. And again, for Hani Yahya, he's 39 years old. He's short for 135 too. He's 5'6". He should really be fighting flyweight when you think about it. But obviously, you don't want to cut all that weight at 39 years old for the first time. Again, this is a guy who fought in WEC. Right? He fought in, WEC back in 2007. That was his debut in WEC. The main event was Uriah Faber fighting for the featherweight championship. Hani Yahya has been around for that long. He beat Mark Hominick on that card, right? That's just kind of showing you how long this guy's been truly fighting. Again, shout out to him, right? Hani Yahya, beat Eddie Wineland back in the day, a former WEC champ back then, right? He got his shot at the championship, I think he did, right? Oh, was Benavidez? Wait, Benavidez was never champion there. Oh, never mind, didn't get that shot. I thought he fought Wineland for the belt, I'll be honest with you. Again, WEC, I'll just be completely honest with you, before my time, I don't know the full history about WEC. Even though I think their cage is the coolest out of anyone I've seen, honestly. I love the blue mat that WEC did have. But anyways, yeah, I think Yahya, again, legend, I'd say. He's been around for a very long time. Shout out to him. But man, he's had so many fights. This is going to be fight number 41 for him. He's just taking a lot of damage, and you're coming off a knockout loss. I get that was a year ago, but still, I'm taking Victor Henry to go out there and get a finish early. I just don't know if the chin's truly there for Yahya at this point. He is a sitting duck once this fight does stay on the feet and he can't get a takedown. So give me Victor Henry to win the fight by first round knockout, and we are on to the main card, starting off with Tim Means and Uros Medic. So yes, the Dirty Bird, Tim Means, is still fighting in the welterweight division. He gets Uros Medic, who is coming off a loss in his last fight, right? He loses that fight by neck crank in the second round. He gets the fight on short notice, and he took on a very good opponent who nobody wanted to fight. And we'll talk about him next week. I don't want to butcher his name because honestly, I will butcher his name. But you know who I'm talking about, right? It's the dude from Kazakhstan. He's really good. Or Kyrgyzstan. He's really good. We'll talk about him next week. Anyways, Medic's coming off the loss by second round, submission. Before that, though, I haven't seen a better performance out of Uros Medic than I did against Matthew Semmelsberger. That was really good. That was in Utah, in Salt Lake, back in July of 2023. I believe that might have been the only fight I got wrong in that entire card. It was. Yeah, I went 10-1 on that card. The one pick I got messed up on was Semmelsberger losing to Uros Medic. Like, I got Gaethje, I got Pereira, I got Lewis, I got, Kevin Holland, I got all those fights. I got, Kopylov winning. The one I didn't get was Medic losing or Medic beating Semmelsberger. And Medic, has been pretty good, right? Like, you see the striking that he's able to put on. He does have power. All three of his wins in the UFC are by knockout. When you go back to his first one, the Alan Cruz fight, where he knocks him out with the flying knee. And then he loses to Jalen Turner, no shame in that, but beats Omar Morales, beats Matthew Semmelsberger, and then loses his last fight. That's fine. He gets Tim Means here. I'm just a little bit afraid for Tim Means in this fight. Not because, again, skill-wise, I think Means is kind of on the same level. It's just that he's kind of getting up there in age, right? He's won one fight out of his last four, and it's against Andrea Fiallo. And Fiallo, fell off a cliff in the UFC. This is a guy who wanted to fight on every single pay-per-view, and we were like, I was all for it, right? He beats Cameron Van Camp at UFC 274. Then he turns around right away to fight in Singapore at UFC 275. I thought he was going to beat Jake Matthews. He loses to Salikov after that, gets knocked out, by the way, in both those fights, gets knocked out by Buckley, then gets knocked out by Tim Means in his next one. Definitely no longer in the UFC, right? Like, that's unfortunate for Fiallo. But that means his only win in the last four. Losses to Morono, Max Payne Griffin, and Kevin Holland, which aren't bad losses, but Tim Means really hasn't won all that much other than a guy who doesn't have a chin anymore in Fiallo. In a pure stand-up fight with a 40-year-old Tim Means, who again is getting up there in age, against Medic, who's really just hitting his prime at 30 years old, yeah, this is going to be tough for Tim Means, because I do think Medic's a lot faster. I think Medic's got a lot of power as well. And don't get me wrong, Means is a very tough guy to knock out. He's only been knocked out twice in his entire career. You go back the first time, very long time ago, right? How you beat Means usually is by submission. That's how Kevin Holland did it, right? That's how a lot of guys have done it. Morono submitted him. Last time he's been knocked out was Nico Price. Got knocked out in the first round back in 2019. I don't honestly know the other one. I'll be honest with you. Yeah, he has been knocked out twice. I think it's probably very early in his career, back in 2004, because again, this guy's been fighting since 2004. Yeah, he made his professional MMA debut against Josh Barlow back in 2004 in March of that year. He's been fighting for forever, which is crazy. Was fighting in King of the Cage for a while, made his UFC debut on UFC on Fuel TV 1. Main event, Diego Sanchez losing a decision to one Jake Ellenberger. He got cut for a little bit, 1-2 fights, came back. But yeah, Means has been around for forever at this point, right? This is going to be his 15 plus 13, if I can do math. I'm blanking on this. This is bad. This will be his, holy crap, 29th professional fight in the UFC, because he has one no contest as well. So yeah, again, math is hard sometimes, but Tim Means has been around for the UFC for a very long time. He gets Uros Medic, the Serbian fighter, who I believe trains out of Alaska, which is odd. But again, he's coming off a loss. I still think he's able to beat Tim Means. Means is 40 years old, Medic's 30, so 10 years younger for the Serbian fighter here in Uros Medic. He should be able to go out here and pick up the victory. I think he is able to knock out Tim Means. Again, something that's only happened once, which happened again 5 years ago against Nico Price. I think Medic is able to do it against, again, a 40-year-old fighter in Tim Means. I guess Medic will be 31 by the time the fight happens. He'll be 31 by a couple days. I think the doctor does win. Unfortunately for him, he won't be able to see Joe Rogan after his fight because he loves Joe Rogan. But I do think actually he comes out there and he wins this fight by knockout. Give me Uros Medic to beat Tim Means by second round TKO. I think he gets it done. Excited for this fight though, because Means definitely does bring it and he's not going to go down without a fight. But I do think that Medic picks up the win. Going to the featherweight division, we have got JSP, Jonathan Pearce, who at one point I was very high on. If you've been watching the channel for a while, I've been very high on Jonathan Pearce, but then he loses to Joe Anderson Breathu in his last fight. He will now get one David Onama in this fight. And for the Ugandan fighter, training out of Glory MMA and Fitness, he's coming off a win over Gabriel Santos in his last one by second round TKO. Before that, though, that crazy fight against Nate Landwehr. And Onama, again, fought well in that fight until he didn't, because, again, Nate the Train simply outpaced him. And eventually, again, Landwehr started to break him late in that fight, and Nate Landwehr won a majority decision. Again, his opponent is Jonathan Pearce. And Pearce, before the Joe Anderson Breathu fight, was 5-1 in the UFC. But he goes into that fight over, I believe it was in Brazil. No, that was an Apex fight. Oh, man. He loses an Apex fight by ninja choke to breathe through. It's basically just a guillotine choke with more grip. If you remember Myro Bueno Silva beating Holly Holm, and that's a ninja choke. They just grab the bicep instead of wrenching on it. Anyways, it's just a much more sunken in guillotine choke. That's really all it is. But JSP, right, big wins before that, beats Darren Elkins. Again, that was a mismatch, but still, he beats Darren Elkins, beats Makwan Americani, beats Christian Rodriguez, beats Omar Morales, beats the PFL zone and Kai Kamaka the third. We'll see if by now Kamaka has beat Bubba Jenkins. I sure hope not. I hope Jenkins wins on Friday. We'll see. But of course, this video is going out on Sunday, so you'll see it when I do. But anyways, right, JSP's been on a run. He gets Onama now. Onama, again, hits very hard. That's what he does. I do worry about him late in this fight, though, because Onama does tend to get tired as the fight goes on, right? Mason Jones is able to kind of outpace him late in their fight back in 2021. Same thing with Landwehr. You know JSP's not going to go away. You know Jonathan Pearce is going to remain in the fight throughout its entirety, and JSP is going to make Onama work because he is going to grapple in this fight as well, right? He is going to make this a gritty fight, a fight that I don't think Onama kind of wants to fight. Obviously, I think Onama wants a stand-up fight, but I don't think JSP is going to entirely give him that because I think JSP is going to be, switching this up in terms of the striking and the grappling and the wrestling as a whole, which again, I do think makes it very hard on Onama to win this fight because again, Pearce is going to drag this fight out. And the later this fight goes, the better it's going to be for Jonathan Pearce. Because again, Onama's gas tank is not the greatest. I didn't pull this clip, but I saw it. MMA Guru said this about Onama once, about how James Krause was talking about him when Krause was still, allowed in Glory MMA and Fitness before he had this gambling scandal, that Onama wouldn't really work cardio with them, right? He wouldn't do conditioning. Onama really just showed up there to try to just, he would just work on his MMA skills, but wouldn't really condition at all. And that's something, again, that has kind of hurt him. Let's just be honest. His cardio has been bad as he's gone on in the UFC. All of his wins have been by, first or second round finish. The fights that have gone in the third round, though, he has lost. I think Jonathan Pearce does get this fight late in the fight. I think he does take down Onama. I think he gives Onama a lot of problems. And again, we say it all the time, your grappling makes your striking better. And I think that's what makes Onama, Onama have to worry a lot in this fight. I'm sure he could get Pearce with one big shot. I wouldn't be surprised if he just lands big on Pearce early in the fight. But I do think JSP extends the fight, and I do like Jonathan Pearce to go out here and win this fight by unanimous decision. Let's now go to the heavyweight division. We have got the UFC debut of Jonathan Diniz, the Brazilian fighter, taking on the former NFL player in one Austin Lane. Now, Austin Lane is not the greatest UFC heavyweight, right? This is a guy who was the Fury FC champion. He beats Juan Adams for the Fury FC championship in a barn burner. He wins into the fourth round against the former UFC name in Adams. He defends the championship against a guy who named Eric Lunsford. This is when I kind of watched Fury some back in 2022. In 2021, Lunsford was coming off a win over one, I believe his name's Richard Odoms, a very old guy. He's like 44 years old. Lunsford knocks out, does he knock out Odoms or beat him by decision? I think he knocked out Odoms. I think Lunsford still hasn't fought since. He beats Odoms by first round knockout, right? Okay, so Lunsford, it's on the same card, I think, as Adams and Lane. They turn Lunsford around right away for Austin Lane, and Austin Lane wins the fight by TKO, but it's a leg injury for Lunsford. It's a checked leg kick, and his, leg just goes out on the leg kick. All right, whatever. Lane gets a shot in the Contender Series. He wins the fight. He beats Richard Jacoby by TKO in the first round. Jacoby, though, not the greatest name. He's actually coming off of a loss to Jose Augusto, the former Bellator name, who I'm surprised is not fighting under the Bellator banner anymore. Maybe he is. Maybe they just couldn't get him a fight, so he fought in LFA, but I don't know. Right? Richard Jacoby's coming off a loss to Jose Augusto. Lane beats Jacoby by TKO in the first round. Then he has those two fights against Justin Tafa, right? He pokes Justin Tafa in the eye in their first fight, I believe it was in Jacksonville. Yeah, right. Tafa goes halfway across the world from Australia to Jacksonville, Florida, just to get eye poked in 29 seconds. They run the fight back at UFC 293, Adesanya and Strickland, and Justin Tafa knocks him out with a left hook in the first round. So now here Lane is coming back, fighting Jonathan Diniz, who is 6-0, who's coming off of a win on the Contender Series against Eduardo Neves. He knocks him out with, it's a decent combo, gets him with the jab, then a cross right after. I'm not overly impressed with Diniz, I'll be honest, but I'm not overly impressed with Lane as well. I just think, again, Lane has had better wins on Fury. But truly, other than that one Adams win, who is he beat, right? He doesn't really beat Lunsford. Lunsford injures his leg in that fight. This is a tough fight to pick. It's not the greatest heavyweight fight. I do think Lane shouldn't be as big of an underdog as he is. I don't think he should be a plus 200 dog. I think this should be more of Diniz minus 175-ish, Lane plus 130-ish, I think should be the odds for this fight. I think this fight will get closer as the week does go on in terms of the odds. However, I am still favoring the favorite in this fighter, in the Brazilian, in Diniz. I do think he's the all-around better fighter. I think he's got way more power. That's where I think the discrepancy in this fight is, right? I think both these guys can throw, but I do think it takes Lane a lot more time to get going than it does for Diniz, right? And I know that the win over Richard Jacoby is somewhat, it's a first round finish, but Lane doesn't have that type of power where he can just go out there and knock you out in the first round. Don't forget, the guy lost to Greg Hardy back in 2018. Yeah, Greg Hardy knocked him out in the Contender Series on Lane's first attempt at making the UFC. He has built his way back up. I do think Diniz, though, has so much more power. He's a former pro kickboxer. And I just think he gives Lane a lot of problems in this fight. I don't think Austin Lane wrestles. That's not really what he does. He's going to be more than willing to stand and bang with Diniz. And we just saw this guy get knocked out a couple months ago. I think we're going to see it again. I guess it was a month or a year and half a year at this point. But still, I think he gets knocked out again. Give me Jonathan Diniz to win his UFC debut. I'll take him to win the fight by first round knockout. Okay, our next one here, we've got Ariane Lipski taking on Karine Silva. Interesting to see where the odds are at, because I'm seeing get a lot of fluctuating with the odds right now. You can probably get this fight around even right now. I don't know how it's going to change as the week goes on, but I'm surprised Karine Silva is not a bigger favorite, because she is undefeated in the UFC, 3-0, all 3 fights by submission. If you go back to her win in the Contender Series, it's a guillotine choke submission as well. She's so dominant on the ground. She's a really good grappler. And we've seen Ariane Lipski, sure, she has done well in terms of grappling in her own right, but I just feel like Karine Silva is on a different level. I think Karine Silva is much better than Ariane Lipski in terms of grappling. And again, I know that Lipski had potentially probably the submission of the year back in 2020. It is that knee bar finish against Luana Carolina over on Fight Island. But still, since then, Lipski has been, a mixed bag of results. Right, look at her fight against Montana De La Rosa. 2 fights after she gets that submission over Carolina, Montana De La Rosa takes Lipski down and controls her and dominates her on the ground. After that, she beats Mandy Baum. Mandy Baum was horrible in the UFC. Loses to Priscilla Cachoeira, then wins against JJ Aldridge. It was surprising, sure. Beats Melissa Gatto, beats Casey O'Neill. Casey O'Neill just didn't live up to the little hype she had. Okay, Karine Silva is a killer. She is truly that good on the ground. Watch her Marina Moroz fight. Gets the fight to the ground, boom, guillotine choke from the bottom, it's over. And she also drops Marina Moroz in that fight as well. She has the stand-up game to back her up. Now, I don't think she can go and straight up just trade with Ariane Lipski. I don't think that would be smart. I think Lipski can catch her. I think Lipski, again, former KSW champion, she has the capability on the feet. So I don't think it'd be entirely smart for Silva just to stand and bang with her. But if you mix it up with the grappling, yeah, it's going to be trouble. Because Silva, again, she had the knee bar win over Katlyn Souza. She beats Poliana Botello in her first fight by Darce. She's got so many different skills on the ground. It's just a very tough fight for Ariane Lipski. Because how does Lipski win? Well, I think she has to keep it standing. Because I don't think she should engage in this grappling fight. I get she's got 4 submission wins, and I think she's going to try. I think we are going to find out who the better grappler is in this one, because I think Lipski thinks she's better grappling-wise than Karine Silva. Obviously, I think that Silva's the better grappler, but I don't think Lipski thinks that. So Lipski, I think, is going to be more than willing to engage in that grappling fight. So in the first round, I think we are going to find out who the better grappler is. As we get into the second and the third, though, that's where things do start to change. If Silva is able to show and prove her dominance on the ground, then Lipski's obviously going to try to keep the fight standing. And that's going to be tough, because if Silva does, get set out to saying, all right, I want the takedown and I'm going to try to grapple her this entire fight, I think the takedown is going to be there for her, right? Karine Silva, decent wrestler, but again, like Lipski got taken down at will by Montana De La Rosa. And I know that's De La Rosa's game, she is a wrestler, but still, like, if she's able to do that to Lipski, I think Silva's able to do it as well. I think Karine Silva is going to be the first fighter to actually submit Ariane Lipski too. I think she does go out there and get the submission in the second round. I'll say it takes a minute. I think, again, the first round is going to be more of a feeling out process for the fighters, and we're going to see again who the better grappler truly is. And once we get into that second round, I think it's going to be Silva. I think that's where she does start to take over, because Lipski then is going to try to go, somewhat, one-dimensional. She just wants to strike, but then no, okay, Silva's going to get the fight down. Silva is going to be able to submit her pretty easily. I do think so. Once she's able to find that pathway to the ground, I do like Karine Silva. I keep mixing Karine and Ariane together, but Karine Silva should be able to go out there and win the fight by second round sub. It's her biggest win to date. Does it get her? God, is she in the rankings right now? She might be. I don't know. The UFC's women's divisions are very thin. Let me check. Is she in the rankings? Silva. Let me see. 125. No, she's not in the rankings. Jillian Robertson's 15. Michelle Waterson's 14. If we're being honest, Waterson probably shouldn't be even in there anymore. So she'll be coming to the rankings very soon. The winner of this fight will be ranked, I think, very soon. Oh God, I'm looking at strawweight. Oh my goodness. They are ranked 13 and 12. I was thinking, wait, yeah, Robertson and Waterson haven't fought at 125 in a while. Waterson only fought there once. Robertson used to fight at 25. No, okay, 25. Yeah, Silva's 13. Lipski's 12. Yeah, I mean, again, very much in the mix at 125 pounds. Give her washed up Viviana Araujo. Put her on the same path they're putting Natalia Silva on. I think Silva and both Silvas, Natalia and Carini, will be at the top of the weight class very soon. Definitely Natalia Silva. I think she's going to be a champion someday. But Carini Silva is going to win this fight. I think she gets it done by second round submission. On to the co-main event. Ryan Superman Spann takes on Bogdan Guskov in this fight. Surprising that Guskov's in this spot, but the UFC has not been afraid to put Guskov in spots like this before. Go back to his UFC debut. It's a fight against Volkan Oezdemir in his promotional debut, right? That's saying something. Oezdemir's a former UFC title challenger. He's the guy that welcomed Yuri Prochazka into the UFC. They tried to do the same thing with Guskov, but no, Oezdemir's a lot better. He took him down, knocked him down, and then got the fight in the ground and won the fight by submission in the first. Guskov has responded though, right? He won the fight against Zach Poundga. Was that a co-main event? Why do I feel like that was a co-main event? It was not. Okay. Oh, was the first fight on the card? Okay, I don't know. Because usually they do those fights where like the co-main events, because Zach Poundga's had co-main events. No, okay, it was early on the card. Whatever. Poundga loses. Bogdan Guskov knocks him out in the first round. It's a good performance, but man, I feel like this is just too much too quick. Like they are quickly, again, giving him a guy in the rankings, right? They gave him Oezdemir in his first fight. Oezdemir is ranked 9. They're giving him Ryan Spann, who's ranked 11. Are they seeing something in Guskov that I'm not? Like, I think the guy's good. Don't get me wrong. I think he's got really good hands. I think he can strike. But, like, is he on the level of the top 15 right now, though? I don't think he is. Like, he had an extensive run outside the UFC. Again, some of it, though, is in Uzbekistan. One of them was in Makhmud Muradov's promotion. I do believe that's Makhmud Muradov's promotion over in Uzbekistan. Again, just kind of unproven guys he's beat. But yeah, like a win over Zach Poundga is good. But does that warrant a fight against Ryan Spann? It really doesn't. Ryan Spann is sitting at around a -220 favorite here. I feel like that's where this fight should be. If not, Spann should be an even bigger favorite. Because again, this is an arguably top 10 guy who I understand has lost back-to-back fights to Nikita Krylov and Anthony Smith. And yeah, I actually did pick Anthony Smith to beat him, and he did. But Spann's got power in those hands. Again, you saw the way he was able to knock out Dominic Reyes. Don't forget, he does miss weight in that fight, but it is what it is. And he's able to grapple too, right? He chokes out Ion Cutelaba in their fight. He does get choked out by Anthony Smith in the first fight too. But that's something, again, that could end up really helping Ryan Spann in this fight. And actually, I'm going to take Ryan Spann to win the fight by submission. Because, yeah, Guskov wasn't able to fight off the grappling game out of Volkan Oezdemir, a guy who, doesn't really specialize in the grappling game either. It was only Oezdemir's second submission ever. Ryan Spann's a guy who can actively go out there and chase submissions. He's got double the amount of submission victories than he does knockout victories. He's got 12 of them in his career, and a lot of them are as a result of the knockdown and as of the damage he's able to do on the feet. And I think that's kind of what happens here. I think Spann does wobble Guskov, and I think, again, Guskov maybe, shoots a desperation shot or something, and Spann does hit that guillotine that he does go to a lot. That is his signature choke. And I think he's going to win this fight. I'm going to take Ryan Spann to win the fight. I think this one's over quick. I'm taking Ryan Spann by first round submission. I feel like this is somewhat of a levels fight. I think Spann hits a lot harder than Guskov does, and Ryan Spann's gonna have a 6-inch reach advantage as well. This is a levels fight. As a wise man once said, he used to fight in this weight class, or still does. He's a world champion, kind of, in this weight class in Bellator. There are levels, and I feel like this is somewhat of a levels fight. Again, I understand Spann has lost back-to-back, but I don't think Guskov's top 11 material as of yet. He's 31, Spann's 32. I just don't think Guskov's as good as they're, kind of making him out to be with his opponents, right? Yeah, he beat Poundga. Poundga is like top 35. So it's a huge step up, and I just think Ryan Spann is better. I think Ryan Spann, again, wobbles him. I think there's a discrepancy on the feet, and I do think there's a discrepancy in terms of grappling as well. I don't think Guskov's bad. I think he does hit hard, and yeah, like, he could be able to go out there and wobble Spann a little bit. Like, again, he did, blitz Poundga and knock him out, but Ryan Spann's not exact Poundga. And Ryan Spann will be able to keep his distance definitely with his reach advantage too. I like Ryan Spann a lot. Give me Superman to win the fight by first round sub. Again, I think he wobbles Guskov, and eventually he goes out there and gets the submission. Let's go to our 5-round main event here in the flyweight division. We've got Nicolau taking on Alex Perez. I talked about it in the open. Yes, Alex Perez has not won a UFC fight since UFC 250. We just finished UFC 300. That says something. Again, this was originally supposed to be Manel Kape, Nicolau, a good fight that probably could have got the winner a title shot, right? Especially if it was Manel Kape. Now, the winner of this fight's not fighting for the belt. I wish this fight was Muhammad Mokaev versus Nicolau. That would make all the sense in the world. If Mokaev wants to fight for a belt, you take the fight on short notice in a main event and you go out and beat a jiu-jitsu guy in Nicolau. That's what, he should have done. I don't know if Mokaev was even offered the fight, I don't know, but that's what I would have liked to seen rather than the guy he just beat in Alex Perez. And now, again, he beat him only 2-1 on those cards, but still, I would have liked to seen him take this fight. And Urseg's fighting, Pantoja for the belt. We'll see what happens in a couple weeks. But I would like to see Mokaev take this fight. I don't know what Kai Kara-France's ability is right now. I don't know if he's still injured. He said he wanted to fight for a BMF belt, and I get Kai Kara-France pisses a lot of people off. It kind of pisses me off too, I'll be honest with you. Just his entire thing kind of pisses me off. But I would like to see Kai Kara-France in the spot. I get Albazi, I think, still hurt too, so he couldn't have taken it. Honestly, I wouldn't have minded Royval taking the fight. Royval's injured too, though, I think. And, if Royval again wants to fight for a belt, though, he's already beaten Nicolau, just do it again. But I get Royval's hurt. But seriously, the name that makes sense is Muhammad Mokaev for this fight. Because he's 7, Perez is 8, Elliott's 9. He's going to fight Tatsuro Taira in a couple weeks, or I think a month. Schnell is fighting for the belt. The fight that would have made sense was Mokaev and Nicolau. And that's a fight, again, where Mokaev can be in a main event, and truly, that's when he can establish himself as a future title challenger. Now, I think he's going to have to fight Royval. I think that's going to be the title eliminator. The winner of that fight should fight for the belt between Royval and Mokaev, because those guys kind of have separated themselves. I get Albazi's in the frame, or is in the picture too, but he's still coming off of injury. Same with Kai Kara-France. Honestly, maybe you do Kai Kara-France and Mokaev, and you do Royval and Albazi, maybe, and just see who has the better victory between any of those guys, right? Because pretty much any of those guys could fight for a belt. Probably not Kai Kara-France, but the other 3 definitely could. And now you have this Nicolau-Perez fight. And yeah, Perez hasn't won since 2020. What does Alex Perez do well? His leg kicks are very good. As you saw in the Jussier Formiga fight, he's going to chop the legs, right? You watched the Mokaev fight, Perez wins the second, but the third round, Mokaev, kind of out-wrestles him and wins the third. He loses to Pantoja. Pantoja gets his back and submits him pretty quickly. Figueiredo gets on his neck and chokes him out with a guillotine choke. Is Nicolau on the grappling level of those other 2 guys? I wouldn't say so. I think I would take Pantoja and Figgy a lot more with their jiu-jitsu compared to Nicolau, but I do think Nicolau's more than capable. However, the guy has not gotten a submission finish in the UFC, so, since his first stint in the promotion back, in 2015, he got a submission win, over Bruno Correa by Japanese necktie on Belfort Hendo 3 in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I forgot that happened. Well, don't forget, again, after that, Hendo loses to Belfort, then he beats Hector Lombard, then he gets a title shot, because that's funny. But anyways, and he arguably, I think Bisping won, but that fight was close, don't get me wrong. I like Bisping too, though, so I'm not even going to complain. But anyways, that's the last time Nicolau's got a submission victory in the UFC. Now he gets 5 rounds to do against Perez. Do I think he gets it? No, I think he does win, though. I think he is going to be able to, outstrike Perez. I just don't know how good Perez truly is. The guy's ranked what? Perez is ranked 8, and he has not won a fight since, again, 2020. And that's against Formiga, who's no longer in the UFC. Before they beat Jordan Espinoza, he beat Mark De La Rosa, and he lost to Joseph Benavidez before that. He has not beat a current guy on the UFC roster. I can't pick him. He has not beat a guy who's still on the UFC roster. It's bad. I think Formiga, right, just won it. Formiga has not fought since he won an LFA. He missed weight in that fight by 4 pounds, but I get Formiga should probably still be in the UFC. But I don't know. He's still in the video game for some reason. I think Nicolau wins. I think Nicolau's a better grappler. Wrestling-wise, maybe Perez does have a slight edge, but I don't know. Perez isn't the greatest, right? He's been caught in submissions before. Pantoja was able to take him down. Mokaev was able to take him down, even though Perez fought decently in that fight. Benitez able to knock him out. Like, I like Nicolau everywhere this fight does go. It's kind of an anticlimactic main event because I don't think much is going to happen, I'll be honest. I think Nicolau wins kind of a boring decision. And yeah, like you're saying, okay, flyweights can't be that boring. I just, I don't know how great this can really be. I'm going to take Nicolau to win the fight by decision. Yeah, he goes the full 5. I would say a finish, but, like, I don't trust a guy who's, he knocked out Matt Schnell, but he knocked out Matt Schnell right after that war he had with Sumadarji, like, literally 3 months after. Schnell took that fight way too soon after he went through that war on Long Island. So that was more of a result of the Nicolau knockout was more of a result of Schnell's chin rather than Nicolau, I think. And before that, his last win is the Japanese necktie victory, again, over Bruno Correa back in 2015. So it's been 9 years since he's gotten a finish by submission. I don't think he gets against Perez. I understand Perez has been submitted a couple times in the UFC, but I do think he just gets out-grappled and out-positioned in this fight without Nicolau getting the sub. I think it does go the distance. However, I would not be surprised if Nicolau does get a sub. I think Nicolau is a pretty clear winner to win the fight. We'll see, though. I'm taking, again, Matheus Nicolau to win the fight by unanimous decision. And, folks, that'll do it for our UFC Fight Night Nicolau versus Perez predictions here on the channel. Make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video. We'll be back next week for UFC 301 from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, in the main event for the Flyweight Championship. The reigning defending champ, Alexandre Pantoja, taking on Steve Erceg. And in the co-main event, the King of Rio returns. Jose Aldo Jr. takes on one Jonathan Martinez in a very tough fight. Oh, and Anthony Smith fights Vitor Petrino too. But folks, thank you all for watching. Make sure that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like and make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. Folks, thank you all for watching. I'm Mamba. Forever.